Hello, everyone. I'm joined today with Bill Geradts from Geradts or Geradts. I keep getting it
Right.
wrong, but I'm sure he'll point it right. So,
Just stick to Bill for the rest of the thing. You'll be fine.
Bill from Armageddon Expo here in New Zealand. I'm also from Beyond Media. Is it? It's Beyond Media. Am I getting it right?
Essentially, we needed a company name that covered everything
Beyond
we were
Reality
doing.
Media.
Beyond Reality Media,
All
because
right.
that's the Armageddon. We own the Armageddon Expo name as a company, but as our parent company is Beyond Reality Media, just because it covers everything that we
Excellent.
do. So
Awesome. All right. So with that, Bill, please take it away. Tell us about yourself. Give us a bit of a bio, and then we'll hit the big questions after that.
Well, I don't know, just turned 50 last year. It was a lovely birthday during COVID where we didn't get to do anything. I've been a nerd since I was, I don't know, 12 or earlier. I've been in and out of comics since I was about 16. I've been in and out of sci-fi pretty much forever. And when I was in my early 20s, I got involved in the Doctor Who fan club, and then that branched into me running some video days, and that branched into me running some sort of fantasy events, and that branched into me running, creating Armageddon 27 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And we've been, 27 years. Next weekend show, depending on when you're watching this is the weekend before the June show, is our 100th event, which was supposed to take place last year, and then obviously we had to move things around. But so and that's pretty much been my life for the last quarter of a decade. So over half of my life working on Armageddon. I got 4 kids. I got a couple of grandchildren now. I got too many cats. One of them's sitting over there, sort of just sleeping, and a dog. I live in Christchurch. I moved down here about a year before the earthquake, so about 12 years ago, that was fun. And we had been married for 32 years to the same person, and I'm slightly insane. Pretty much me. And I write and publish my own line of comic books that of various characters that I pretty much created or worked on with other people on.
So, without going into Armageddon, we'll leave that to later. Let's talk about comic books and why you got into comic books. I mean, you're a nerd, a comic book nerd, a geek. And so, did this sort of come across because you were able to set up Armageddon, or was it because you thought, this is what I want to do along with it?
Well, I remember back, and I want to say it's 2001, but I could be wrong. But let's say 2001. We hosted Walter and Louise Simonson at the show. And I remember off the cuff pitching him a comic idea that I had. Not as a serious thing, just like, this is an idea I had. I think this would be a great book. And him being very, very courteous and saying, yes, that's a good story. You should do something with it. And I mean, it could have been just being nice. Probably was. Lovely man, lovely wife, very talented.
Yeah.
And then it just sort of sat in the back of my head. And then I think about, I want to say 2007, I was going to Comic-Con, and which I recommend to anybody. Comic-Con is the Mount Olympus of Mount Olympus and Mount Everest of events.
Yeah.
So I get into LA, and I've got some friends, Christian Gossett, who I've worked with quite a bit on these over the years. And I thought we were going to go to his house, and the next morning we were going to drive to Comic-Con. And instead he's like, no, we're pretty much, we're going to pick up some stuff, and then we're just driving to San Diego. It's only a 3-hour drive. So it's not horrendous. It's like a Rotorua trip from Auckland. But I'd literally just got off a 12-hour flight when I hadn't flown a lot. And so I'm jet lagged, and I'm tired, and there's 2 ways I can go when I'm jet lagged and tired. I can either go the sleepy, grumpy way, or I can go the I won't stop talking kooky way. And I went that way. And so we're having this trip, and we're talking, and I'm joking around, and I pitch him a version of this idea that I had at Walton 5-6 years ago, and he was like, "That's great. We should do that book. We should do that book." And the problem I have is when people say shit like that to me, I tend to be, I'll actually remember it, and so I followed him up, and he just said, let's continue with that. So we we got together, we talked more, and then Christian came back down to New Zealand, must have been a year or so later. I don't think it was too long, a year or so later. And he was doing some film scouting. And we went up to Attica, and there's an island off there that's just it's covered in sand dunes. And you used to be able to do, if you got the right permissions, you used to be able to go across, and they would take you in dune buggies and spring blast. And on the way there, we worked out, the Beyond Reality Media name, we pretty much laid out and worked on the story ideas for, I think, for Warden. And and that's when we just went from there, and then worked on getting an artist, and couldn't really find an artist, and then we made a good connection, and then that followed, and that took years, just getting the setup for it in place. Like now, if I want to get an artist to do a book, I literally can contact a dozen people plus the half dozen guys I work with regularly, and I can get stuff done pretty quickly. If I need a piece of art, I pay for it, but I can get it done. Whereas back then it was a real struggle, and like anything, it takes time to find those connections. The biggest problem with particularly I found with local artists is that they have day jobs. And normally when they're working on books and stuff, they want to work on their own stuff. So paying somebody to do something for them, it sounds nice, but it's not a priority. And I understand that now. I didn't so much then. But so we pretty much started then, and just I had a couple other ideas of things we wanted to do, and reached out to a couple other people, and before I know it, I've got 12. I mean, we pretty much started about 2010 was when we really got into this properly. So it took a few years to get it at that point where we were ready to go. And then you'd print a book, and then we had to edit it because it wasn't quite right, and you think, oh, this is going to work, or no, it's not, and 13 years later, I've got about 15, 16 books. I got one that came out last year, which we haven't been able to release yet, which is the Time Traveling Tourist Organized Chaos, which is that one.
And you got the new one?
Yeah,
I've got the old one, you got the new one.
Yeah, that was the Time Traveling Tourist is the most popular book we've done, and I'm really happy with that. And Chaos was a direct sequel after half a dozen books in the middle of it, and and then volume 4 of Warden, which this is coming out later this year. I'm just waiting for it's supposed to be delivered in July, but with shipping nowadays, it could take longer. So
now you work with you said you work with 12 different artists. You've got yourself,
a bunch of different artists, about a core of 3 or 4 actually, but there's always, but you've got the artist himself, and normally there's an artist and a colorer. With some books, it's an artist, a inker, and a colorer. But most of my artists do their own inking. But there's a Christian Doklemensky who does great inking for some of the books we've done. Coloring, I've got 2 main guys that I've used for coloring, Kote Carvajal and Juan Moraga. Are the 2 main guys that I've used for that. Artists, I've got Gonzalo Martinez, Alan Robinson, who's just doing a Fantastic Four comic for Marvel at the moment. I'm very happy for him for that. He did the cover for that in the first half of this one. He couldn't do the second half, but I literally just started. I'm 1 issue into the final Warden volume, and he should be doing that depending on what his schedule ends up being like. So let's talk about with Christian and yourself. Yeah. So let's talk about Christian and yourself building this BRM, universe. Now, these books, you've got the Inspiration Duncans, Warden, Traveling Tourists, Time Traveling Tourist, Darwin Fairies,
And what else we've got here? I think it's about. Is there another title in that I'm missing?
Okay, so the way my titles work broke down, and I'll do these separately. So there's Warden, and which we did with Christian, and that's the superhero. It was a superhero gothic sci-fi, essentially.
Okay.
And we're about over 400 pages into that now. And again, it was envisioned as maybe a 300-page book, and then I got to the end of the original story and realized we could take it so much further. And it surprised me how Lovecraftian it's been inspired by. And Christian was heavily.
When I was reading it, it's very dark. You know, it's not your average, Batman's a bit dark. Yeah. It's not like your Captain America or Avengers book. So tell us about the Warden a bit more, and then we'll move on to the next one.
The idea of the Warden was it started off as this when the Warden was the original idea I pitched to Walter Simonson. It was and I pitched this to Christian, and he redeveloped it with me, right? So. The idea was very much Superman. Well, what if Lex Luthor was trapped in Superman's body?
Okay.
Right? It's the general, the basic idea of it. Because the Warden is very much a Superman archetype. And there's so many of them around. I mean, I'm just watching The Boys at the moment, and Homelander is pretty much evil Superman. It's just, there's so many different versions of it. But the idea is that the Warden is this... goody two shoes, American Dream, apple and apple pie superhero, and he's always got the cheesy smile and the you'll be okay, little Jimmy kind of attitude. Yeah. But what he actually is he's a prison, and the bad guy is inside him. And what happens is whenever the Warden is defeated, the bad person who defeated him gets zapped and gets enclosed inside the Warden, and he becomes he's a prisoner, and the Warden is a prison warden, and he keeps him there. And the idea is that they're sort of the fuel for the fire, but they also have to it's to redeem them. That they can only see good, they can only see what the Warden's doing, they can't interact, they can't do anything. It's hell. But that's the core idea that starts with it. And it's funny how when you're writing a comic, how some of the side bits don't seem important at all. Like Andy and Mandy in the first couple of issues are his kids, joke kids, and I honestly had no plans for them whatsoever. And at volume 4, Andy's leading the villains. He's the main character. I mean, and Mandy's turns up, and she's a huge impact on it, because characters once they start establishing themselves, once they start becoming real people, it's very easy to tell which direction they're going to go. And you might not agree with that direction. I wouldn't do some of the things that they go, obviously, but the character says what the character's going to do. And I found with Warden, there's a lot of that sort of came into place. And so we, Alan and Maina Kote Carbajal, who's doing the coloring. Alan Robinson is doing the artwork, did most of the artwork. I've had Mark Yaza do from Spain, do a little bit. All great stuff. The latest, certainly volume 4, is primarily written by me. Christian's been heavily involved in the early ones, and he was involved in the storyline, but he's co-creator of that book. So that's the Warden. Then there's Attica, which we've done. Attica was the book that sort of meandered a bit. I wasn't happy with where the art ended up going in the first volume. And we did this 180-page hardcover, which I love the hardcover, and I've got the I don't know if you can see there's the poster, sorry, the cover artwork there.
Awesome.
And just the first volume, it goes somewhere, but I had an idea of where it wanted to go, and it's very much a Greek gods, but in the modern world. But the idea for this came from, and I'm waiting for the trailer to drop next week, the Black Adam. And I just watched a bit of a cartoon of him, on The Brave and the Bold, which is a surprisingly silly but good Batman cartoon.
Right.
But the story they had there was very much the story. And the comic story of Black Adam is you have Adam back 5,000 years ago, and the wizard says, you have the powers of Shazam. He goes and does stuff. He turns evil. The wizard goes, you are Black Adam, and he throws him in jail for 5,000 years. And then in the current world, he comes out and he's pissed off and he's angry and he's ready to go things. And my thought was, if you'd been in solitary confinement, so to speak, for 5,000 years, would you come out a better person or a worse person? And obviously, in Adam's case, now he's much more nuanced than that. But the core story was pretty much he comes out just as bad as he went in. There's no changes. There's no adjustment. Boom. I was watching Young Justice, and General Zod is in the Phantom Zone for 40 years, and he's the same dude. There's no, I've been in here 40 years, and I don't know, maybe thought maybe I could have been wrong, or I've done something. No, he's Zod. He just comes out and does the same thing. And I can understand that analogy, but nobody goes into prison and comes out the same way they were in, no matter who you are.
So if it's us normal human beings, we'd self-reflect, right? I mean, we'd go in with think about what got me here, what attitudes brought me here. Do I think about my moral things that I might have adjusted, done right or wrong? And so this is Attica for you, or this is Black Adam?
No, Attica is. There's every story you could point to. Oh, this is where they got the idea. The idea of Attica is Black Adam. He's nothing like Black Adam. It was purely the idea of, I'm going to put a powerful person in prison and see what happens. And when he comes out, he's going to be different instead of the same. And Attica comes out as a pacifist, as the sort of the general way to describe it is, what if Superman was a pacifist, right? He comes out, he's massively powerful. He's been essentially storing up power for 5,000 years or a couple of thousand years in this book. And he's also done horrific things that you can't necessarily forgive. And so in the first book, he's just trying to steer things to help other people see that their actions affect other people. Echoes of pain. Like if I well, okay, so say if I go down the road and I punch somebody in the face, and then I run away. Now, I've no consequence on my end. I'm just a dick. I've done something bad. But the person that I punched, that's going to carry with him maybe forever. I mean, maybe that's something that just echoes in. And he might go home and beat his wife, or he might shoot himself, or he might just have a pissed off day and go and just be a dick to some other people. And it's one action affects. And the idea of Attica is very much that you need to stop that. You need to look at what's happening and go, if you do something, you don't have to, you can own up to it, or you can try to fix it or whatever, but you have to acknowledge it so that it doesn't get worse. So the first book sort of has that, but it just didn't come together quite the way I would have liked. And so I put it on shelf for a bit, and then I worked with Christian on the second book, and the third one we worked a little on it together, but primarily it's me. And those ones are much more self-contained, and they're a bit more mythological. The second book is Medusas, and I loved how we got those put together. And essentially, Attica had screwed over the Medusas, and this is him. They're still around, so this is him fixing it or trying to fix it, because you can never fix something like that, but you can at least try to make amends, and that's up to the person to accept it or not. But at least it can make a difference. And the third one is very much Zeus.
What sort of genre do you think you put this into? Is this your mythology or supernatural genre? Because you've got Warden as superhero.
Yeah, Gothic superhero is Warden. Attica is much more mythology and self-help, quite frankly. I think I've written that book. There's a lot of personal stuff. Attica is the most personal book I've written. There's a lot of personal stuff in there and I've always used the books to a big degree to help my mental state. And Attica was the one that sort of worked on most on that.
Yeah, it seems more reflective in the sense that, you know, it's like what ifs, you know, because we ask ourselves questions: what's the reaction if I do this? What's the reaction if I do that? And like you said, what's the downward spiral of things that we, you know, whatever chance things we do.
You look at it in the modern age, and you've got Jacinda Ardern saying, "Be kind." Now, some people beat her over the head with that and say, like, "Oh, she's being a little mean to this person. She's not doing what she says." But the way I interpret that message is, if you go out there and you do shitty things, or you're just, COVID is overwhelming, and it has been for everybody. And if you take that and you throw it out into the world, then all the people that you hit with that are going to they're going to bounce, and they're going to bounce. And if you're throwing out at least some kindness or thinking about that, it makes a difference. And it's a very similar idea. I think that there's a misunderstanding of, well, the way I interpret what she means is pretty much just try not to make things worse for people around you. And you can do that just by being kind. And with Pollux and Attica, he's trying to redeem people, but he's also trying to show them that they need to stop, or at least try to make amends for past sins, because those sins are still out there. They still exist. They might, if you say you murder somebody and then you go on with your life, the family of that person and all of those things, they're living with that thing for the rest of their life. And that's never going to change. And if you go in and you go, okay, here's the answers you wanted, here's the stuff that you needed, it won't fix it, but it can make a difference. And then those people who were maybe angry or torn or not sleeping, maybe they get some sort of peace. And then that peace echoes on. And Attica is very much that in my mind. And but yeah, mythological self-help. And then
I mean, let's like, you know, you mentioned somebody about getting murdered. Like, we've had a family member being murdered in Auckland, and so, you know, for whoever did, you know, the person who did it went to jail. That's fine, but now we still live with it, right? So the way I dealt with that pain was I created my own character, right? Like you're saying, you know, we create our own stories and stuff to get over whatever we do personally. So I created my own character and went, okay, this is what I'll do with this story. You know, two people done wrong, right? And did you find when you're creating something with something you thought it was going to be small, or did you come at it, I have this great idea, this is what it's going to be, or did you come with it and go, this is a little idea and then expand it, or how do you approach your writing process?
Very, very much that. There's
little idea.
The characters, I don't think until you're doing. One of the things that surprised me the most, and shouldn't have, is that the characters tell you where you're going to take them. There's right. You know, you can bring in bad people, and you're still writing them from your own thing. But it's surprising how much you can you create the character, and then one decision leads to another, and by the time you sort of further down the road, you realize that the character is the one driving the direction that they're going in, because you get to a point where you go, this thing has to happen. And then you go, well, if this hurdle is there, this character is going to respond this way. And that's because the character has gone in that direction. I mean, you might start, it's like growing a child. You start them off, but their personality is something that they almost feels like they create themselves. So right. You're very much small, like an acorn that just grew. And all that. And Attica is very much that. I mean, I had a much better idea of the story, but I'm happy. I've been happier with the second and third volume than I was with the first of that. And I've got a fourth volume filed away that's a couple of years away. That was more of a homage to the what's it called? The Prince and the Sparrow story.
What's it about? I mean, I'm not aware of that.
Well, when I was a kid, we used to listen to the radio on Sunday mornings, and they did an amazing Spike Milligan Bad Jelly the Witch. It was one of my favorites. I still listen to that now. It's such a great one, right?
Yeah.
But there was another one which was, I think, read by Orson Welles. I could be totally wrong there, and it was written by, I want to say, Oscar Wilde, which again I could be totally wrong. This is off the top of my head, and essentially it's a story of a statue covered in gold and jewelry. And the statue looks across the city and he sees starving children. And the sparrow's on his shoulder. And the statue says to the sparrow, because the statue can talk in the story. Sorry. Crank sheet.
Yeah.
Over there. Here's the sparrow. Take off my gold things and give them to the poor so that they may be fed. And then the sparrow comes back.
Remember it now.
Yeah. Right. And in the end, the sparrow takes pretty much the statue takes everything off him. He plucks out his eyes and he can't see, and the sparrow dies because it misses winter, but it doesn't want to leave the prince. And the end of the story is a little religious, but it's, you know, the town's guys, the mayor looks up and goes, "Oh, that statue looks pretty shitty. Let's throw that away." And when they throw it away, the angel Gabriel comes down and the Lord has said, "Bring me the two most precious things." And he brings them the broken heart of the statue and the little bird. Something like that. Anyway, but that story, I had an idea for that I wanted to do differently for Attica. But that's a couple of years away, and it's very raw. But that's where that's going.
The actual story, I remember reading it, and it's a very important story that, like, in the sense of what it's about. It's about giving. And, you know, what I can think of, it's like you see something, a need, right? And you're trying to fill it. And even if you're trying to fill it, you yourself become empty because you've given out so much of it. And that kind of reminds me of what, you know, like, in a sense, what you've done with Armageddon. Because you've come out, like, you know, we're talking about 27 odd years ago, right? And you saw, you know, you were doing what you're doing with Doctor Who, and I'm sorry to bounce off here, but this is, you know, I think this is a cool way to go into this, is that you know, you guys were putting together something involved in the nerd culture and the geek culture, and there was a need, and that need grew and grew to what it is now. And it wouldn't have gotten to that if you didn't decide to walk into that or take that on board.
We switch to Armageddon talk for a bit. I don't know, when we started though, Armageddon or geek culture was not it was a thing, and there was certainly a lot of it out there, but it wasn't what it is today. It wasn't accepted like it is today. I mean, when I was a kid, it was almost I don't know, a mental deformity that you wanted to hide from people. It was, you know, because you didn't. You didn't. I mean, you're a nerd. Okay, well, you get beaten up at school. You're going to get, you know, embarrassed and made fun of. And that was pretty much the way. I mean, a lot of people went to see Star Wars. A lot of people got toys and stuff. But there was a very big disconnect. And it's only been, in my mind, in the last 10 to 15 years, so since the mid-2000s, that it's really become a thing where people were like, "Oh yeah, this is okay. You can do this now," right? Well, that's how it felt to me. And so when we started, it was very much just a thing for small things. And there's a bunch of small little events. I went to the Geek Market in Christchurch last weekend. And there's a bunch of these little events which are very similar to what we sort of were doing with the Doctor Who Club for a while. But like anything, there was just a point where I think I just wanted to do something bigger, and so we did. And the difference is that we just continued with it. And certainly the first 5 or so years, it was not a big thing at all. I mean, it was big for us, but it wasn't even a fraction of what it is now. And then we just stayed the course and kept going with it, really. And of course, I mean, New Zealand being New Zealand, we've had to diversify. And there's one of the explanations I've always had for what I like about Armageddon the most is I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. I mean, if I'm one thing, that's what I am, right? I've been a Doctor Who nerd since forever. We went to England for the 50th anniversary thing. I met and hosted a bunch of the Doctors. If I can do a Doctor Who thing, I freaking will. Now, the problem that I have is if you do a Doctor Who convention or an anime convention or a cosplay convention or anything that's specific, right? You're feeding that culture, which is great, right? And as a Doctor Who fan, I'll go to a Doctor Who convention any day of the week if I can, right? But it doesn't necessarily grow that fandom. It feeds it. But unless you're a fan of something, you're not going to go, oh, there's this cosplay event on, I'm into cosplay, I'll go. But if you're not into cosplay, you're probably just going to go, maybe not. Now, some people will, and that's great. Right. But the problem with any kind of thing is that if it's specific, you generally, unless you're interested in it to start with, you're not going to go. If you have look, I want to know who the All Blacks beat, but I don't want to go to any of the games. I'm not into rugby or anything like that at all, right? Yeah. But and that's so it's the same sort of thing. If you're not into rugby, you're not going to go to a rugby game unless somebody drags you. And then maybe you get into it and you become a big, passionate fan. But realistically, you're just not. And fandom is very much the same with that. So with Armageddon, we've been able to grow it so that, I mean, Armageddon doesn't mean a damn thing. It's just a cool name that we came up with because we didn't want to describe one thing. We wanted to cover a bunch of things. And that's always been the strength, that the show, every show we do can have a bit of everything involved. And it's much more diverse than most shows internationally are. But also that's purely because of the nature of New Zealand. There's a handful of pop culture stores in this country. The fact that we pull off a giant show in Auckland is goddamn amazing, considering realistically what we have to work with locally. But there's a lot of passionate people, and there's a lot of people who are into different types of fandoms, and we've been able to sort of keep going to a point where we've ridden the wave, where now we've got people who were children that went to us before that have their own kids.
Right. So stopping for a minute there. Now you mentioned it was in mid-2010 that you saw the rise of popular,
no,
fandom becoming popular.
2005. I would say if I had to pick a rough time, 2005-ish. Certainly for us, like when we moved to the Showgrounds in 2009, that was the start of when things really picked up for us. And it wasn't until
I'm thinking that's probably around when Iron Man was coming out. That whole 2008.
2008. After that. But yeah, Marvel over the last 10 or so years, Marvel has definitely been one of the defining factors for people to be just more accepting of it. Again, people are still a little thing, but there's always different levels there. But back when I was a kid, I got beaten up at least a couple of times. You know, I had some encounters that I'd rather not talk about. That purely because I was a nerd at the time. And I'm sure, I hope that doesn't happen now, but I'm almost sure it does. But
both of us are in the similar age group. I'm 49, and you just turned 50 last year. So I saw that around me as well. I was one of the ones who used to get picked on as well. And so, you know, it was like the nerds would like get away from everybody and be in the library and have their own little club and play the game, you know, whatever. And it's kind of like
Stranger Things, and there's sort of I can feel the 80s vibe in there quite nicely.
Yeah, and they've really pulled it off to make people realize what it was like back then compared to what it is now. Now you can just buy a T-shirt off the freaking, you know, off the warehouse, which, you know, or whatever store's got them. JJ's got your, you know, your anime, what is called, Ditto Ero or something, the horror, you know, anime.
Well, again, the world has opened up a lot. It's a lot easier to get. I mean, I used to, when I was around 20 or so, we would go to these video days, and at a community, normally a church or a community hall in Auckland somewhere. And there, every 3 months, there would be, they would screen the current Star Trek. And must have been, yeah. And somebody would get the videotapes from America, send them over, and have an NTSC player, and we'd turn up and we'd watch them because they never screened them properly on TV, you know, New Zealand TV, or we got them a year later. And I did a lot of that with Doctor Who as well, because there wasn't, the videotapes went out. So if somebody had copies, you were like, oh my God, I can watch this stuff. Whereas now you can watch, you know, if you want to watch something, you can find it, you can watch it. I wanted to, I saw, I was watching Chronicles of Riddick, which is one of my favorite films. I mean, Vin Diesel's an idiot, but he's great in this film. And
yeah, he's awesome in Riddick.
Yeah. And I was reading about a 30-minute animated version that they did that I'd never heard of, and I was like, okay. And I found
really
it, cool. Downloaded it, and watched it within space of a couple of hours. And you know, but back in the day, not something you could do. So the shows became something where people would gather, and I think they've evolved much like a comic book where the character takes his own life. Armageddon's gone in so many different directions that I wouldn't control even if I could. And I'm glad I don't. And people have invested their own passion into it, their own thoughts, their own memories. And they use the show as a gathering ground to meet other people, to a lot of people are living online. This is the real world they can come to, and it's still not the real world. It's become a very different event over the years. And in 10 years' time, it'll be a different event again, because the last couple of years we've changed a lot of stuff we're doing, and we're adapting again and moving forward again. So
talking about like being able to meet up with different people there. You've also the fact that you've been able to get to where you are, you've been able to bring some amazing, like for me as a comic book fan, right? Huge names that I consider huge names in my fandom, and so how has it been trying to over the years trying to get these people to come? And because I know most of them, like they're committed, they're year-round committed to whatever they're doing overseas, because I mean we're New Zealand, right? So we're at the bottom of the world. We're probably the last consideration for them to tour, because it's a 12-hour trip.
By no means. A lot of creators and any guest, really, a lot of them historically were always very keen to come to New Zealand. I mean, certainly Lord of the Rings didn't hurt, but they do a lot of shows around America, and that's where they make their money. And there's it is a business, very much so. And one of the problems we've always had is that we're not as financially returning as some of the bigger shows or whatnot in America. But we're normally some people they're just like, I'm too busy, I can't make it, and you just go, that's fine, totally get it. And others are like, I want to go, and they'll contact us. And I've got enough. I've been doing this a long time, so I've got a pretty good reputation internationally. So historically, one of the things that's helped us is we'll reach out to one guest, and we'll just say, oh yeah, by the way, we hosted this person that you might know. Feel free to ask them. And that's always good, because then they can they can go, oh, I'm traveling halfway around the world, I don't know who these guys are. And Mark Wade says, oh yeah, I've been there 3 times, they looked after me. Or New Zealand's the show's crap, don't go. There's everybody's different. And then there's some guests, that 1 or 2 guests that we've had that didn't have a good time. Generally they have. We've gotten to a point where we look after people pretty well.
The other thing is, like, I've noticed that, like, where the comic stands over time has gone down, but the anime side has gone up, the expectations on. So how do you grab your anime guests? How do you get those people? Because I mean, like, you're on the side of Doctor Who, Western media.
That's my fandom. That's my fandom. But there's a lot of people who are. It's like, I have agents that I deal with, and with voice acting, that's become more and more of a thing. I mean, when we first hosted some Dragon Ball Z guys in 2001. I got them through going to Comic-Con in 2000, and they were really keen. And back then, it wasn't something that was a big thing, and it's certainly over the last 20 years, it's become bigger. And I've noticed in the last 2 years of COVID that voice actors have become a lot more popular in other seas events, which is why, like, next weekend's show is. Our focus is voice acting, because we put a hunk of money into a big esports event we're running, and we wanted to make it different. But also, when we planned the show, I didn't know if we could actually physically host people. So the voice acting option was the safer bet in terms of, if they couldn't make it, we could make it work. But there's always changes. There's always changes to how we do it, and what's popular one year and the shows that are popular and the voice actors and the actors and who's available and who's filming locally, which we don't seem to get much of a benefit from that, but there's always the odd one. You know, there's always things that we can do.
Now, you mentioned finances and you know, with what people think of what Armageddon's making and what is the actual reality of it, because I'm like, you know, there's a lot of costs involved in, like, say, if you're bringing, you know, a voice actor from Japan, or, you know, who's well known in that community, but you're thinking, well, how do I weigh up with another one who's known in America? How do you, you know, like you said, you deal with agents and stuff. The cost of bringing these people over, how do you actually go, well, do they go, well, this is what my thing is, and then you go, well, what if, do you negotiate, or how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are some guests that we host that we go, okay, this person's going to cost X, Y, and Z. They're worth every dollar. We should spend that money and get them to the show. And there's others that cost, you know, sometimes we'll just go, look, we can't afford to spend that, and other times we'll just spend the money because what the hell? It's the big difference. I think that some people's mentality is that we're this big corporate thing, and it's money, 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 and certainly money drives what we do, because I need to be able to afford to live and be here next year, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff we've done over the years, if we were a proper event, there'd be no way. There'd be just no way. I mean, there's so many things that we fund separately from the show that if we were purely looking at the numbers, we wouldn't do. And that's because I'm a nerd. And yeah, some things I do 100% because it's a money venture, and that's because I'm a businessman.
Yeah.
But
right.
More and more.
So let's have talking about that. Let's move on to about what actually, how much, you know, each city that you do it in benefits enormously by what you put on, by the way you put on these events.
We did I don't know what to call it. We did we hired a company that can track what your economic footprint is. And for the Auckland show, the economic footprint was $14 million.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the, you know, and we took that to the council and said, you know, here we go. We're doing, when we do a show, we generate $14 million worth of revenue for the city.
Right.
So, and that was a few years back. It's probably more now.
So what was it? So what was the reaction like?
At least a couple of million per show. I mean, I don't see that. I'm just saying that's people traveling, spending money, paying for food, buying stuff at the show, hotels, accommodation, tourism, all of that kind of stuff. So, I mean, every event, no matter what the event is, it's the food show, it's Armageddon, it's the home show, whatever, every event has a solid financial footprint that it leaves behind. That is significantly higher than what the event itself generates. It's collateral damage of a financial aspect that helps the environment. And I know for Auckland next weekend, there's a lot of companies that have been waiting for the show because it's their major fund. I mean, they were hoping for it last year because, you know, this makes them a lot of money, and they've been on a starvation diet, and they're really waiting to get some into the dough.
Everybody's been on a starvation diet for the last 2 years, and I think the small businesses, especially small businesses, but now with you guys running, how many shows do you guys do now?
So okay. So at the moment, we are doing technically 6 shows this year. We've got outside of Auckland, we have Tauranga in July, which is supposed to be in February, Palmerston in August, and then Wellington and Christchurch in December, which was supposed to be in March, April earlier this year. So normally they're a bit more spread out, but we had to combine them in. We've got the Auckland show in June, and which is number 5 or number 1 for the year, I should say. And then ideally we're doing our main Auckland one, which will be more celebrity focused. We've got a bunch of actors and animation people and whatnot planned in for that. And that's set for October, but honestly, it depends on if the venue's even available, because honestly, we have no idea at the moment. The showgrounds went into liquidation. The showgrounds went into liquidation a year ago, and sorry.
Oh, so if the showground went into liquidation, were there an option where you guys could actually go to the council and say, "Hey, could you make that, you know, kind of like a thing, so we could actually take a piece of it?" Or
whole events industry is on tenterhooks at the moment, and including us, and we've been looking at options. And at the moment, we're waiting for what's going to happen. I honestly don't know. It's highly likely that next weekend's June event is the last one we'll do at the showgrounds. I'm hoping not. But it's also possible that we'll be doing October there and we'll be fine. But it's possible we won't do October at all this year. It just won't happen. I've looked at other venues and nothing's available that will do the job. And we're a huge event, and trying to squeeze us into a smaller venue just doesn't work, unfortunately. So I am looking at some options for next year.
My first event I went to was 2007 Attica.
Yeah,
and
you know, the second to last show we did.
Yeah, for that one, that was the first time I actually went to a convention, cosplay. I mean, not cosplay. Sorry, a comic convention. That sort of pop culture convention in my life. You know, I'm like, I think when I was like, what? Gosh, must have been like about 30-something odd years old, and it was my first experience, and I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never been to one. So, and I think that's a lot of people have the same thing when they go to Armageddon for the first time. They don't understand what it is. But now, when you've gone to it several times, like I have, I know where the photos for my for my favorite stars are going to be. I know where the auditorium to talk to Chekhov. You know, I mean, I've had such amazing experiences at Armageddon. Yeah. I mean, like I got a photo with and I always forget her name, the star of Sanctuary, you know, and that she made me feel. That's it. It's always a hard name to remember, Amanda Tepic, you know, and she made me feel like, yeah, she made me feel great. You know, she put a smile on me. I got to, you know, ask a question of Chekhov about Babylon 5, you know, and that sort of experiences. And then I got David Lloyd to sign, you know, draw something for me and sign my V for Vendetta mask. These experiences that live with us because we're such fans of what we, you know, enjoy. And I think what Armageddon does, which, you know, I mean, is bring all that together and make us feel good about who we are as a, you know, community. But then, like we talk about, like,
that's also people investing their own, taking what we do and making it their own. And going, we're going to meet up with friends. We're going to do this. We're going to spend a bit of money, or I'm going to support some artist allies, or whatever. I mean, it's where we can go. We can present the show, but what people do with it, how they interpret it, and what they take away from it, so much on their other end, and it's amazing that way. And I love it. I love that because it really does come down to providing something more. And I think that. I mean, we're not over COVID. I mean, I don't know where we are right now. We're in this. I feel like we're in this limbo ground of COVID's done, but it's not. But this is what it's going to be like for the next 10 years. Because, you know, unless there's a cure tomorrow, this is it. This is the world we're living in. But I do think that the event will be something that people have been looking forward to, because there's Auckland, it's nearly been 2 years since we've done an Auckland show. There's so many people that are looking to talk to other people and meet with them, see them, dress with them, catch up. And that's that's a social aspect that I appreciate, and I like it, but I'm not much of a, I always feel a bit more solitary in a crowd. If you can, you know, it makes it hard for me. I think people see it a different way, and I'm very good at doing the people thing and whatnot. But I tend to have some. mental reservations, because I have a hard time doing that. And as I'm getting older, I'm finding that that's something that's more and more who I am. And and there's a lot of other people that are like that, and I think they just assume that I'm this big outgoing guy, and to a big degree I am, but I'm also quite happy just sitting in a corner doing nothing. So
right. I understand that in the sense that a lot of cosplayers have told me that as well. You know, they're like very insular, they're very quiet, and then when they put on the costume, boom, you know, blow it up, and you know they're happy, shaking hands, taking photos, and everything. You know, and that's another aspect of conventions where you've got like cosplayers having events like that. When did you decide that was going to be a part of Armageddon?
Cosplay.
Yeah, the whole competition.
2003, we were doing. We hosted some Japanese creators from Japan, as Japanese creators generally are, who were some of the artists and designers of Sailor Moon, and I honestly can't remember the origins of the cosplay thing. I think it was something that I'd seen a little internationally, but it wasn't anything that I'd seen properly in New Zealand, and that was so.
It's like
Sailor Moon. I love Sailor Moon as a cartoon. I mean, it's both stupid and great in equal measure in my mind. But the cosplay was just the thing, and started from there, and it certainly built up. And there's people who worked on it that were significantly invested in making it a thing, and we owe them a lot to get to that point, and including the current hosts. That I personally. I tend to leave them to their thing because they know what they're doing and they don't want me sticking my nose in either way. I mean, it's big enough that I don't want to stick it in places. But they do a great job. But that's a community, and it's become a community. And and you're right, it is about, well, I mean, there's many different ways you could read how the cosplay community is. Some of it is about just putting on a facade and going out and being social and energized when that is not who you are, and there's others that's 100% who they are, you know. But that's the joy of it. You get to be what you want to be.
Let's like there is the aspect of cosplay where, you know, a lot of people tend to think that like just because someone's in a costume that they are that person, whereas that they actually, like we're saying, that they can't. They're quiet, they just
players not consent. We've got guards around. I mean, if somebody has a problem, it always irritates me a bit when I hear somebody complaining about, oh, I had a problem there, but they didn't say anything or do anything. It'd be worse. I mean, it'd be worse if they did say and nothing was done, because I'd like to think that if there's a problem, we address it as quickly as we can. And unfortunately, there are always some people that are just people who should not be in a crowd, and they. But that's the joy of being in a group, and most cosplayers generally are in groups of people. So that if there's the odd issue, which no matter what event you do, there's going to be the odd creeper, for want of a better word. And the
weird thing is that they actually seek out these things. You know, that's their thing. It's like you always have someone who's out there to cause problems.
Yeah, but they'll go to a rugby game and be the same for some people there. It's just different because you think you can walk up and take it. I'll just take it. So I was at Comic-Con in, I don't know, 10 something years ago, during when Farscape was on. And I was in line to get an autograph from Gigi Edgley, who played Chiana in it, right? And
that's the blonde chick, isn't it?
No,
like
white wig, grey. I love Farscape.
That's the one.
If anybody's watching hasn't seen Farscape, freaking watch it.
I love it. Yeah,
it's so well done. It takes about 6 or 7 episodes to really get going, but once it gets moving, it just goes. And it's four seasons and a miniseries that finishes the story amazingly and wraps it up. One of my favorite shows. Anyway, so I'm in line, and I know a couple of guys in front of me, so I'm close enough that I can hear what they're saying. And he goes, "Oh, can I get a photo?" And so she goes, "Sure." So she stands up, and the guy stands next to her, and he puts his hand right on her ass, and I just watched her just lift his hand up, right? Didn't say anything, took the picture and off he went, right? And then she just sort of commented that he was a little handsy to the guy. And I was just, I watched this and went, Jesus, wept. But the way she responded to it was like it was something that had happened more than once, which unfortunately I think it had.
Yeah, and I think like that's the thing.
You get guys like guys, and maybe some girls and others. That's how they are, but that's not. You're talking outliers, and ideally, if anything like that happens, we encourage anybody to say something. I mean, we're pretty general. I'm happy to boot somebody out if they're inappropriate at an event, but we don't tend to get a lot of people reporting that. It's always afterwards we hear, oh, this person was a little skeevy. But there's also the other side of that is being skeevy isn't a reason to kick somebody out, because there's people who just don't come across personable.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the nerds as well. There's outliers of nerds who are like kind of the autistic spectrum, right? Because their social skills aren't there with that. And I find that
we've got to sort of be careful with that, because we do attract, with the audience we get a lot of different people, and there's a lot of people who, well, not a lot, but there's some people who, you're right, just don't function well in groups, and you do have to factor that in. And sometimes you just have to say, look, just take a step back a bit. But some people don't get it. It doesn't necessarily forgive bad behavior, because you still have to function in society, but it can mitigate it.
Right. Let's move on to like celebrity guests, and how do you get across to getting like someone like Tom Ellis, who I would have loved to meet, because Lucifer is one of my #1 shows in the last couple of years. And you know, when they gutted it, I was, you know, when they were going to close it, I was gutted, and I was all over Twitter going, get him on Netflix, get him on Netflix, because I love that series so much. And then to have both of them come to New Zealand, and at a time when did they come? Was it like 2020 when COVID was gone?
No, it was before then. But I remember when Lauren arrived, I missed her at the airport because she dyed her hair pink, and it took me a minute to recognize her. She was lovely, absolutely crazy in a delightful way, but totally the opposite of the character she plays. Sometimes I've got a lot of agents that I deal with, and they send me names and say, "Oh, would you be interested in this person?" Or they send me a list, and I'll pick out names. Tom Ellis, I've talked to 2 different agents about him. I've gotten to a point where we at least had a modest conversation, but some people they're so busy, or the money needs to be higher, or that they're just not interested in a long trip, or they don't want to do conventions as much, or there's so many different reasons for them not to do an appearance. And just because we want it doesn't make it so, right? And there's others that
I mean, you always like are there like someone's that you like on your top of the list that you've been trying to get for years and you haven't been able to get?
Yeah, and then sometimes you get them. I was trying to get John Barrowman for like a decade, and then we just got him, you know, and it was like, great, let's do that, you know.
Torchwood, you know, Torchwood, and Doctor Who, I loved him. Yeah,
we got John Tom Felton at the same show, and it was because they all said yes, and I was like, if I turn them down now, I'm just not going to get them. So we just went for it. And Nathan, we got him at that sweet spot between Castle and The Rookie, where he was just off for a year, and all he was doing was some guest starring, and he was taking a break. So he came down, did the show, went down to Queenstown, and had a fun time there. And we're trying to get him now would be as the American shows can get these guys because they literally can just fly in on the Saturday morning, do a day, do 2 days, and fly back, and they're filming the next day. It's not a problem. We don't have that. It's a week to get here, you know, to come here, do the show, and go back. It's a week of their time. And that only works if they do it a holiday or if they can really plan it. Because the worst thing is to have somebody do all the work, buy all the tickets, get everything sorted, and then the week before the show they cancel because their filming schedule changed. I mean, we've had that happen, and but it's better to mitigate that if you can help it.
That's something that a lot of the attendees don't understand, how that system works, because they're on like schedules where that's like they might be on a film set that's costing like $500,000 a day to be on, because it's filming.
Most talented we're booking them, they're not actively filming. because unless it's something that happens like a week before a show, which is very rare, where you know their schedule is free, I tend to avoid that. You just can't trust it, and most actors won't commit to that anyway because it's too tiring. It normally is just a matter of who's filming and who's not, and even then though they'll stop for work, and that can still happen at any point. And with the in the good old days, so to speak, the filming schedule would start about June, July, and finish about February. So you knew that you had that sort of window of doing events. But now with streaming, they're filming year-round. There's no specific time, so everybody's all over the place. But fortunately, there also is a lot more people to choose from. I mean, classically, historically, it's mainly white males, the audience, but not the audience, as the actors you can get, because most TV shows had one female person, one person of color, and if you had anybody beyond a cisgendered person in there, it was very rare of anything pre-2010. Right. Crunchy, let's see here. Whereas now, I mean, like Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, and even in Discovery, which I love Discovery. It's a little bit of hate, but I think those are just haters. Heavy female crew, which is great. And but also as a person who runs events, it's nice to have every time a new show comes out, it means you've got more people that you can host, and it makes it to a degree a bit easier to get people down because there's more of them. But it still comes down to who's filming and when. You know, I mean, I was
and
looking
also
at
if they're available or not.
Sorry.
And of course, like you said, like if they're available or not. So moving on about do you take on board requests? So like I say, I want Frank Miller to come just for the comic side of things, so I can go and get all my comics, all my Batman stuff signed, just because I'm so much into that whole Batman scene, and you know, and his Elektra and Daredevil, so I can get all my books on. Is there a possibility we go, okay, let's hit up Frank Miller, because I'm one person, but there might be 1,000 behind me who are also wanting the same thing that you're not aware of. Would you take on that request?
No, I don't. It's because we get it's actually one of the worst things that irritates me the most is we get people tagging people saying, "Oh, you should come to the show," and there's so much more to it than that. And to be thrown in under the bus, and then we have to either have a conversation, and then money gets involved in it. It's not just a matter of going, "Oh, you should jump on a plane and come down." It's okay. What's the flights? What's the hotel? How much per diem? What's my fee? And how am I available when they want me? There's so much to it, and when somebody just connects you, or normally it's Twitter, it's always Twitter, and just says, "Oh, this person would be really interested." No person is going to say, "Oh, I wouldn't love to come to New Zealand." The amount of times I've had, "Oh, I've been at a show and I talked to William Shatner and he'd love to do New Zealand." I'm like, I'm sure he would. What else is he going to say? "Oh, I don't want to go to that shithole." You know, of course he's going to say, "Yes, New Zealand would be lovely. I've been there before. It's a great place." Doesn't?
Yeah, and then you got to have the conversation with William, and he'll go, "Sorry, mate, can't do it because I'm way busy, and so on." And there is that, and I'm one of the guys who, I'm like, it would be nice and it'll be cool, but then again, you've already got things lined up and in place already to come to. And
normally,
so what is
I know who's coming for this entire year. I know who's coming.
That's it. That's what I was going to ask next. Who is coming this entire year for Armageddon? So I can get my little notebook out and put the names in.
Yeah. I don't even know I'm doing a show in October at the moment. So I've got a lineup, but also it can change. I can say, "Oh, we've got Doctor Who guest coming," and then it just doesn't happen. So more and more we're announcing stuff closer. But also the guest aspect is for some people, and obviously for yourself, it's a huge part. And it's certainly from my end, it's a fun part. But more and more we're discovering that there's aspects we can put into the show that will enhance the event itself, goes beyond the celebrity aspect. And there's a lot of stuff we put into next weekend show that we wouldn't be doing if we were spending $300,000 on bringing guests to the show.
Right. So let's talk about next weekend show.
Yeah.
Who's coming? What's happening compared to, because this is your first event in Auckland. That's a second event, right? So this is June event, and then you got the October event. So let's discuss about why did you decide that?
We're doing October if we have a venue. At the moment, quite frankly, we don't. So I wouldn't. If you're on the fence about going, you should go, because it might be the last one. Yeah. I'm hoping not, but I honestly couldn't tell you where October's going. I'm hoping to know in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
Look, we've got. I mean, the show's full. We've got esports and gaming has always been a big part of the event, and we're doing spending a crap ton of money on a massive esports stage, which we've never done before. We got 100 computers and 20 Xbox Series S consoles, and then we've got all the gaming setup that we've grown over the last couple of years, plus a bunch of extra things that we're working on, plus more design and more interactivity and more visuals than we've ever had. I'm genuinely excited how the show's going to look. I mean, I think that people who have been to any of our shows are going to go away really loving this one. We decided that we wanted to do more animation. So while we've still got some virtual guests coming in, which has been a great addition, it's a great way to actually have people, like we get Giancarlo Esposito, and I'm just watching him on The Boys. And he's in New York. So there's no way he's coming to the show that weekend. We can beam him in and you can talk to him live and have and interact, which is amazing. And it's opened up so many options for us for guests that would be 100 grand to bring to the show, but we can beam them in and pay a fee, because we're still paying for it, but pay a fee that's much more reasonable for a New Zealand audience. It's not the same as having them there, but it's a good second best. And then we've got half a dozen animation voice actors from one of the biggest lineup of animation guests we've had in years that are coming in. And we've got all that set up. And that'll be the first. We had some guests in 2020, but they're all in New Zealand. This will be the first international guest we brought over. And then we've got a couple of animation guests for June and July, and Tauranga and Palms North, and virtual guests. And then October, ideally, we have a bunch of celebrity guests coming in, because we're looking at that show as a celebrity-focused show instead of the esports show. Instead of next weekend isn't an esports show, but that's certainly one of the many focuses that we're doing. But we're trying to mix and match what we're doing and how we're doing it, so that it appeals to as wide an audience as possible. And at the moment, the response has been nothing short of overwhelming. So.
Cool. So how's the pre-sale tickets going for the weekend? I mean, I know like any venue, any event you're doing, you don't know the numbers because there's a new date this time, but everybody's aware of the name and what it's about. How's the pre-sales tickets looking like?
Really well. Really well. Most of our tickets sell the week of the show. So, I mean, I can only go by where we were at last couple of times, and we're right on track for that. So I'm pretty happy with it. I think we'll see. I think we're going to see a massive crowd this coming weekend. So.
Well, there is a real hunger for people to get together again. I mean, like it's 2 years of just being isolated and not being able to hang out in big crowds. I mean, there are people that enjoy big crowds and big events, and sure enough, Armageddon has created that environment and has fed into that environment where it's good to be around lots of people and be sociable, and not even, like we mentioned, that there's smaller groups, right? So there's smaller groups of people that
I think we might see people come and go a bit through the show, but I think that's a big part of what we're expecting. So, but it's like anything. We're always taking a risk doing any kind of shows, and more so in the years around COVID. But I know this is going to go down really well, and I know people are going to have a great time. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. So.
Cool. All right, let's head back to the comics, because that was a really cool segue into Armageddon. So we don't have to, I'm just looking forward to seeing, I think the celebrity part of it is what I'm into, and the comic scene and stuff, and probably as I get into anime, a bit more voice acting. So we stopped at I think it was Attica. We stopped at Attica. Let's move on to let's say time traveling tourists.
Yeah, there's two other sets of books that we do. Well, a side note to Warden, we did One Break, which links into that book. So that was a fun thing to do too. I wrote that one by myself and did it, and didn't go quite the direction I wanted it to, but I was pretty happy with it overall. And it's been fun because the characters from that are in the new Warden volume, and so that was sort of a spin-off that became its sort of way of introducing the characters. So we did two books from UK author Robert Rankin, which was steampunk oriented, which is nice to do, but I'm not a huge fan of investing money into printing somebody else's stuff. So we're not doing more of that, but great stuff and very talented, funny as fuck guy. And then we started doing, I was working with Richard Fairgray, and I came to him with a couple of core ideas, and very much the ideas developed between the two of us. And it was very much a discussion that went both ways. And in the early stages of this, it's very much a 50-50, I would say, sometimes more, sometimes less, stage of writing, where we would do the story and we'd send it back and he'd write some and I'd write some, and it took a bit of time, but it was a good way to do it. And then the last two books, definitely 100% the time traveling, the new time traveling tourist is 100% me. But the last post-apocalypse was mostly me with a little bit of work from Richard. But again, it stands on the shoulders of everything we did. Richard's very talented. He's based in the States now, doing his own thing. Power to him. So we did a time traveling tourist, the Darwin Fairies, and the Inspiration Duncans, and they're all three separate books. And I sort of said that these are my versions of Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America, and then I decided to do the Avengers, and then we did pre-apocalypse 1 and 2, now-apocalypse, and post-apocalypse, which is like 400 or 500 pages of story featuring all the characters from those three books, and it was very satisfying. And once we'd done, I was like, well, we're done. This is it. And the time traveling tourist book was pretty much the most that and Darwin Fairies, the two most popular books we've done. We've sold 1,500 of each overall over the last 10 years, which is not a lot, but not a little. And I thought it'd be great to do another one of those. So worked on that with Gonzalo Martinez and Juan Moraga as the colorist, and Organized Chaos was the end book, and I'm very happy with it. It's a different tone to the original because the characters have moved further down the road. But again, with Beethoven Jones, who's the main character, I love that name. He's a character that writes himself. You put him into any circumstance, and you know which direction he's going to go, because there's certain aspects that he'll just won't take it seriously, or there's a bit of fun. I mean, he's a bit of a dick, but he doesn't mean it maliciously. But he's and he takes things to heart, and he takes things to heart, whatnot. But for his mind, it's very much going through time and seeing dead people. So you don't have to. Somebody dies on the Titanic, you don't weep for them because they've been dead for 100 years. But so he just enjoys himself, and it's a character that it's very freeing to write, and it was great revisiting him properly. And I'd like to do more, but at the moment I'm in the Warden headspace, and I'm working on that actively.
So creatively, right? Because I mean, myself, I write comics as well. So creatively, how do you, because you're so busy with Armageddon and stuff and all this other stuff, how do you find time to do this, writing comic books and creating these characters?
I've slowed down a bit over the last couple of years, but it's just prioritizing. I try not to do a lot of Armageddon work over the weekends, and so if I'm doing writing, that's when it is. But I have to say that, like Time Traveling Tourist 2, I did a bit of that over the last over lockdowns and stuff. But the Warden book has been on hold for 3 years, since the last 3 or 4 years since I've really picked it up, because I've been finishing the book's been done, but I wrote the scripts for them years ago. So getting back into it this last couple of weeks has been fun, because I'm actively working on Volume 5. I want finish the story. And that's one that'll be, it's been good getting back into it. But you just have to separate yourself. I can't work on one thing and then click over to this. I'm just not built that way. So I find doing it on weekends where I can just disconnect is a much easier way to do it.
So I had a question there. I just went. So when you because your stories are very character orientated and very character driven, do you think that because of that you enjoy writing it more, or you're trying to or you're seeing it as an overall thing, or how do you keep these characters in your head? Because you're trying to flesh them out. So how do you actually? Yeah, I'm trying to get this question right, but when you're playing with
everything's different. Some of them just don't, and a lot depends on the artist as well. I get some responses where I just look at them and I go, it's not there, and then I get pages that just 100% more than better than what I envisioned. He's not subtle.
Yeah.
I dropped a whole stack of hair on me before. Come on. Again, characters tell themselves, and a lot of the time, but that's how I envision it. I mean, you do have to build them up from a point, but it's very rare. I've written a character, or I feel like I've written a character that's doing something that I don't think they would do.
Right. So let's talk about the fairies, Darwin fairies. What is that story about, and what is what sort of genre is that fitting into?
It's pretty much Charles Darwin discovers fairies and teaches them survival of the fittest, and then they totally misunderstand what it actually means, what evolution is, and just go from there. And then they've got very bureaucratic. Again, there's certain rules that they follow. It's a fun one to write. That whole series of books isn't supposed to be taken seriously. I mean, it's serious. It's got serious concepts in there, but it's designed to be just a funny. What's the worst thing that can happen in the funniest way? Which is again why, like, the first half dozen pages of A Time Traveling Tourist is very much the mentality. If you don't get the jokes in the first half dozen pages, you're just not going to get them.
Right. And
Darwin Fairies is the same. It's what's a stupid thing that can happen with Scottish fighting pirate fairies. And that's one of the things I love about the fairies, is because there's so much fairy lore. I mean, anytime you do any research on these kind of things, you go, people picture the fairies as the fairies in the garden, or this little thing, or Guillermo del Toro's ones with big teeth and stuff. And you go, why? Because you can do anything with them, because there isn't a lot of solid lore that says this is what a fairy is. Don't go any there. It's like vampires. Yeah. You can have sparkly X-Men vampires, or you can have normal vampires, and then sometimes some stuff in between. And the fairies were great. I took them what they want, added some characteristics to them, and said, this is what they are, and we just went with that. And it's been fun. They were fun to do. And I based a bunch of those characters. Then Patrick from the book was based on my son. Violet of the Fae. My daughter Violet is 100% that character. I mean, she's not Violet of the Fae. Violet of the Fae is a 5-star bitch, but she's drawn to follow my daughter. And I got her in a costume, and we went to Comic-Con, and she actually did a Violet of the Fae cosplay at Comic-Con, which was a hoot.
This is another thing that I enjoy about. Because when I bought my first issue of the Warden, there was a couple of people dressed up as the Warden there.
Yeah, we had a couple of things. It's been nice to be able to invest a bit of that in to do stuff through the show. That there was a good way to do it. I mean, look, the books they're a fun side project for me. I would like them to be more than what they are, and for some people they very much are. I was wearing a Warden shirt, and I was at a petrol station a few years back, and a guy recognized it, and I was like blown away that it was something that was just off the cuff he recognized, and I thought that was great. And certainly running our own convention, it's great to have my own characters I can use, so I don't have to worry about Marvel saying don't use Spider-Man on your poster. I can go, well, I put the Warden up there. Don't worry about it.
Exactly. So that aspect, like how was it dealing with your competitive kind of thing, because now you've got your own convention, able to sell your own products, products being comic books, creation that you've created as a nerd, right? Because this is coming out of you, years and years of being part of the fandom.
It does make things a little easier in some respects. I mean, it's a bit of self-promotion, but it's also, sometimes it's just easier. You go, I need to use a superhero. Great. I've got a superhero, or I've got artists to draw something for me. We can get it done. As a big event, it does make it a lot easier. If we were an American event, I mean, you can do it. It's just always nice to not have to worry about getting a phone call from Disney.
So, I mean, they're pretty hard on the legal side of things. So the next one,
I don't know. I tend to avoid it where I can. So,
right. So the next one, let's talk about the inspiration of Duncan's.
Yeah.
And tell me about that book and how that came about.
Well, that was one of the earlier ones, and it was very much a book based around what if the world ends and there was just a couple of idiots who were they did it by accident and then tried to fix it. And the idea at the end was that they don't fix it, that the world is still pretty much, it's almost a Shaun of the Dead ending, the way we sort of end it. But and that was fun. It's not the best of the books that we put out. It's an enjoyable one, a little bit of toilet humor, but it's one of the earliest ones. So we actually did a hardcover, and then we edited it and added about half a dozen new pages to it, and then reissued it. And it's one of those ones where I feel better about the George Lucas version, which has just added a bit to it and fleshed it out.
Yeah.
But that we did that to a degree to make it fit into where Duncan's are, and the characters from that fit into the Apocalypse saga really well. I mean, they drive that whole thing, and it's very much their saga, and the Darwin Fairies and Time Traveling Tourists appear in it. Because their story finishes at the end, although one of the characters moves into the new book. But it's very much a little more juvenile than some of the other ones. There's a toilet joke in there somewhere, but it's a fun book.
So with Beyond Reality Media, the comic book side of things, is this universe singular universe that these characters are in? They live in the same universe, or are they like just peripheries?
Those three books, the Darwin Fairies, Time Traveling Tourists, and Inspiration Duncan's, are all in the same universe. Attica and Warden technically are in the same universe, but we did a crossover there because I thought it'd be funny. But beyond that, we haven't really dabbled too much. But the original one, those three books, very much they're set up to be a one sort of big story.
Right. So I got my question that I was thinking about earlier that got lost in a thing. So it's when you started writing these books, did you think there would be 400 pages on that one title? When you first started, or did you think
here's a general story? Here's a general story. We'll go with this. This will be fun. I mean, anybody who starts writing, I'm going to write my grand opus and it's going to be 1,000 pages long is just deluding themselves, or a giant wanker. Crunchy. Oh, okay, over there. But again, the characters tell you where they want to go, and the original story was this, this, and this. And then I thought, once we were working on Darwin Fairies, I got the idea to combine them in. And so the Inspiration Duncans are a big part of the last third of the Darwin Fairies. Yeah. And then they're a minor part in the Time Traveling Tourist. except for until the last page. And then once we did that, it was like, well, now we can do a story where they're all together, and it came from there. But that's also a lot of that. Those 3 books is me and Richard Fairgrave just bouncing off each other to get to where we want, because we had so many different ideas that we threw away, that we thought this would be a great one, and then it's just you talk about, I come up with a great idea and he comes back and says that's a stupid idea, and you realize it is, and vice versa. That was one of the advantages of doing most of the books in a partnership with somebody else. It helped to thread out some of the less good stuff that we could have done. And not that everything that we did has been great, but it's but I'm pretty happy with all the books overall.
Yeah. So my next question is, how do you work with co-writers? Because I don't have co-writers myself. So how do you yourself, working with co-writers who are around the world? Like, I mean, you're Christians overseas, and your artists are overseas, and so on. But like,
Richard was here. Richard was here when we were doing it. We would just meet up and go spend half the noon doing stuff. I think the first time I met up with him, I was in a hotel room. We just talked through that. When I've dealt with Christian, it's very much been when he's been here, or we do a phone call, or I do it when I was in America. And that's why a lot of that Warden and Attica stuff, the later stuff, I've written mostly by myself, but it's been based on original concepts we discussed. But I mean, with Richard, when he moved to LA, we haven't done anything since, because it's not set up for it. And also, I'm feeling a lot more confident. You learn a lot doing it that way. There's advantages to being with somebody else and just going, okay. Particularly when you start, anybody can write a comic. Anybody can write a comic. Doesn't mean it's going to be a good comic. And certainly, again, a lot of my core ideas sucked. And that's the advantage of having a partner in there. And you also need to make sure that you can work with each other, because sometimes you can deal with people that are a little more, this is my idea and I'm not going to compromise. And you need to be able to adjust.
So we're from here, because like you guys are releasing, what's the new book that you're releasing right now, which is the final one? I mean, latest one, I should say, not the final one.
The Time Traveling Tourist Organized Chaos is the book that's coming out next week. We've had that for a while now, so it's good to get it finally out. And then the Warden, the Cultivation of Chaos, Warden Volume 4, will be out in probably, hopefully, Tauranga. That could be later in the year. Depends on what shipping's like, because shipping times are crazy at the moment. So, I mean, onwards. And then Warden Volume 5 will be the next one, and that'll be next year sometime. I'm working on that, writing that at the moment.
Now, because you're at your events and you have your books at your events, do you put a time aside for where you come down and you out of the whole lot, where you go half an hour, now I'm going to be there to sign the books? Or do you actually have that moment, like us comic fans always want our signatures, right?
Yeah, I tend to be, if somebody wants me to come back and sign, I stop at the stand pretty regularly. If somebody wants me to sign something, I'll come back. But I don't tend to set up a signing time, primarily because the big problem with me doing anything at the show is that I need to be flexible. And putting a time aside sometimes is really hard to do, so I try to avoid it. But I'll always pop back, and if somebody wants something signed, I'll get it done. It's nice. It's fun to do. But I've done that a bit at Comic-Con. We've done a few where I've signed the books and we've sold a bunch there, and that was fun. More so because that was really the only time I've really stayed on the area and done stuff. Except last time for one of the days, they disappeared to go to the Jodie Whittaker Doctor Who panel, which was fun to do.
So let's talk about like actual management of Armageddon, right? Now that we've segued into that, so let's say on the day, there's so much happening, so many organized chaos, as we like to say it, that's happening. How do you keep on top of that because of what's going on all over the place? Have you, like, because you've grown up in the last 27 years to get to this point now with 6 events, and some of them you've closed down, right, because it didn't work out or for whatever, like Hamilton, you put it started and then stopped. How did you, what are these management skills that you can pass on to people, or that you've learned in that time?
Well, I mean, by the time we get to the show, to be honest, I'm just putting out little fires. I don't Most of all the staff are doing their own thing. Most of the stuff I'm not actively involved with. The bigger the show, the more you need people in control of things. So if you try to stand there like a ringmaster, you're just going to fail, because that's what I did early days. And there's a point when you spill hot coffee over yourself halfway through a show, you realize you're doing too much. Yeah, that's a fun one. You just sit back and you go, look, I need somebody to handle staff, somebody to handle this, somebody to handle that. And most people are better that way. They don't want somebody standing over them. And I'm more actively involved in the preparation and then just keeping an eye on things during the show.
So if you were giving a TED Talk, right? This is Bill giving a TED Talk, and what would you be, say you got 5 minutes to do your thing, and in your universe, which is the, expos, working with celebrities, working with, all these different people, what would your TED Talk be about?
Make sure that you have good people under you and that you give them your support. I mean, you can second guess people all you like, but all that does is undermine them. You need to make sure that you're giving them as much support as you can, but also just the confidence. And a lot of the time, it's just sitting back and going, look, you're in charge, where you go. It took me a long time to learn that, because I fucked that up a few times. But it's even if people aren't doing the best that you'd hope them to do, they're doing the best they can do. And sometimes you're expecting too much. But virtually all of the people that I work with now, I just leave them to it, and they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing better than I could do it. So second guessing them just doesn't help. As an event organizer anyway.
Yeah. Over the last 27 years, as Armageddon has grown, where do you, with ignoring the last 2 years, where did you expect you'd be now? If nothing happened in the last 2 years.
No expectations. Yeah, no expectations of where we would be now. I absolutely none. I didn't expect we would be doing this full time. We made that decision nearly 18 years ago, 19 years ago. We moved to doing this full time. That was a risk. Doing bigger shows, didn't expect that. I mean, honestly, again, like writing a book, sometimes the story just takes you where it's going to take you. And some things we've gone, okay, we can do this, let's do it. And other things you've just gone, yeah, we don't need to do anything. It's everything works pretty well. But I definitely didn't plan where we're at now. I never planned on hosting actors, never planned on traveling internationally to meet some of them, never planned on animation, never planned on comics, never planned on Japanese guests, never planned on wrestling. These things that they come to you, and you can either go, yeah, let's do that, or not. And that's maybe the credit I can take, where we've gone, okay, let's try it. I'm normally pretty good about trying new things. But I'm also, all of that stuff is dependent on people helping, people setting it up, the talent being in time, and the right thing, and it working. And then the attendees and the public going, yeah, this is something you want to see. I can take some credit for success we had, but I can also take all of the credit for blame for anything we've done wrong. So whereas there's a lot of stuff that has gone right at the show, and that's always because of the staff and the people who've helped us out to get to that point. That's all virtually, they're the ones making a lot of that happen, because they're doing the actual work.
Okay. So talking about staff, how many do you employ full-time, casual, part-time as part of Armageddon?
There's about half a dozen of us full-time.
Yeah.
And then at the shows, we go from 20 to 40 people on average. So, there's a lot of, yeah. But we're dedicated things. And there's extra people we bring in to do other things for us. And there's always new stuff we're looking at. I'm working on a new thing at the moment, which I can't talk about. But if that comes through in about a month or so, we'll have a new announcement for a whole different thing that people won't even see coming. So there's always new stuff popping.
Yeah, that's the opportunities that we have now, because in the last 2 years, we've had time to sit down and really think about what we want to do. You know, because
last 2 years have pretty much been, last 2 years have been survival. I mean, I'm happy to have changed. I'm happy to have grown stuff, and we've taken some risks, and we've been able to keep going. But honestly, any company that's still around that's the success. Anybody who's around after COVID, and that's not a governmental thing. That's just a reality. It's a worldwide thing. Everywhere in the world, some people have thrived, some people have starved, and we're an event company during a pandemic. Just not the worst thing you could be, but not one of the best. And just surviving it has been a minor miracle, and the fact that we're doing okay at the moment is the best part.
Now, last year there was, you guys, because there was a whole, what is it? I don't know if it's in the US they call it PP, whatever, with the COVID bailout thing. So there was a situation there where you guys asked for that because of what had happened. Now, we talked about earlier, right? Because people don't take into context the amount. We said that Armageddon alone brings in $14 million to the Auckland economy. Now, and you guys basically work with so much money and stuff. Then the question was, well, why does Armageddon need a bailout because of that? So what would your answer
well, we didn't,
be, right?
We didn't get any kind of bailouts or anything like that at all. We got the wage subsidy, which was what everybody else.
I mean, excellent in the sense that people are aware of that now, kind of thing. People, because people get like sound bites. Sound bites really doesn't help anybody.
I speak to those, and there's some people who that's the way they want to read things. That they're going to read no matter what we say badly. The only governmental support that we got during the show, we applied for a couple of grants, didn't get anything.
Right.
The only governmental support that we got specifically was the wage subsidy, and that was when we were in lockdown and we couldn't do anything. I mean, we were actively telling people not to pay us any money because we didn't know if we were doing shows. And in some cases we didn't. So that's, we didn't lose any staff. We didn't reduce anybody's pay. And that's $600 a week per person. So it's not like $1 zillion. We got, the government MBIE insurance claim for cancelled shows, but that doesn't pay us. That just covers the costs of our the companies that we use and money that we would have spent already. So, this
is what I mean. So a lot of the problem with TV, right? The problem with TV is you've got 30 seconds to say what you need to say, and that's it. I was watching an interview the other day. They had a very important person being interviewed, right? Well, very important thing, and they had to be cut off because the time ran out. When you're talking to someone like us, like podcasting, you get time to explain and say what's actually happened, so you don't get that 30 seconds where there's misunderstanding to the public. And I find that really horrible in the sense that, okay, this is Bill, this is what Bill did, and no, sorry, that's all we got time for, Bill. So hearing you say exactly what happened, it's awesome.
People read into what they want to read. I mean, at the end of the day, if you do maths, most companies got bugger all. The wage subsidy was a very helpful thing for a lot of companies, but particularly when there's no revenue coming in, and for us, our core cost was staffing, but we had other costs that we weren't. That didn't help. And we managed to make it work. But we're an event company during a pandemic. So whenever the only time the wage subsidy was normally given out was when we were in lockdowns. So we weren't doing shows then. We weren't making money then. And you also had to follow certain criteria, and we followed all of those. So I'm not worried about that side of it. And compared to a bulk of companies, we didn't really get that much. So, I mean, with 6 staff, we're not claiming for, 1,000 staff and then saying, oh, we actually made a profit, but we're going to keep this money anyway. We got 6 staff, which is, 3,600 a week in wage subsidy at best. So,
and these are talented people as well. I mean, because like we said, you bring in 40 only, and this is just one event, $14 million
that's
to the industry.
Side, yeah, that's a side of thing. There's lots of companies that generate a lot of revenue that might not have got help. But I think most companies got crunchy. Just buckle up. Most companies got the wage subsidy. Companies that got beyond that, I don't know. We didn't. So you know, but that's the last 2 years. It's just getting through the last 2 years has been the fun part. So
okay, all right. So we're almost done with almost up to 2 hours now, which is what I promised with you. But let's pitch next weekend, and then I'll finish off with your final words, because you've got your event on the, you know, and like we discussed, October not happened, and so we need a lot of people to go to the event next Saturday and Sunday.
Want to come.
Now, is it a 2-day event?
It's a two and a half. I mean, we're Saturday, it's Friday night. Saturday's 9 until 9, so it's a full 12-hour show, which we've never done before, and full day Sunday. So it's two and a half days, but or what's it, 24 hours for the show. I think over the 3 days.
So what's the cost of the event? I mean, what's the cost of attendees to attend it?
I think it's $29 for an adult. Children are free if they're coming in with an adult. I mean, you can, one adult can bring in 3 kids, no problems. You still need to get a ticket for them. The tickets are free. And that's a thing that we haven't done before, or haven't done for a long time.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Like, this is quite different in the sense that before it was like, okay, adult, they pay as well because they get a chance. But having that, is this because of COVID that you decided to actually make it free for kids this year? I mean, for this event?
There's a couple of reasons.
And what's the age there?
12 and under. So,
right.
You know, primary school. Yeah, it's just there's a couple of reasons behind it, but just it worked out that we could do it, so we did, and it's working based on the numbers so far, working pretty well. So a lot of families and a lot of people struggling. I mean, they want to spend money at the show. I think you'll end up seeing people who, instead of paying for their kids to come in, will just spend that money at the show, which is great for our exhibitors, and also means that the attendees get to walk around. So,
and that's another kind of thing that people, there is that. There's a circle. There's a benefit to the community. There's a benefit to the attendees, and also the commerce of having people come and be there. And I think this is a joy of being part of something which you guys are doing at a higher level compared to all the smaller ones that have popped up over the over the last couple of years.
Well, the smaller shows are great. I mean, I don't want to disparage them at all. They're wonderful to have. And they're servicing a portion of the community that there's obviously a need that we can't do. Yeah. I mean, as I said, I was at the Christchurch Geek Market, and there's the Kauai Cosplay Fest that's on, and those kind of events target a specific audience and deliver better than what we could do because it's the pure stuff, right? But whereas Armageddon is much more, it's a bigger community. But there's options that you get otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, like a smaller event couldn't get someone like John Barrowman because the cost.
Yeah, but that's just economies of scale, really. That's all that is. I mean, look, and they're not, but a fan event or we're big enough that I worry. I've got to watch what I say because I don't want to offend anybody in that area. Okay, those shows are great. Yeah. You should go to them if you see them. Okay, they need your support and they grow. And ideally, the more support you give them, the bigger they grow. But there's the problem with getting bigger is that you need more to keep going. And
that's right.
You get John Barrowman to a show, and that's great. But you need to have the capital to make that work, and that's not something the small event can do. Now, some can, and New Zealand is a very different market. It always has been. I mean, the New Zealand market is very different from Australia. There's a lot less cash on the street here in terms of what people will spend. And historically, we're way more affordable than most. I mean, we do autographs here, $30 to $60, sometimes a little more. that are $60 to $100 overseas.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
So it's we're always adjusting. But yeah, as I said, if there's a pop culture event in your city or even outside the city and you can support it, go. The more people that go to those, the better. And get from it what you will. And if you want to do more, if you want to start your own thing, if you want to grow something, do it. Yeah. It's not that hard to start one of these things. The hard part is maintaining it and building it. Anybody can do. I'm going to save up and spend $100 to get a community hall, and I'm going to do a horror event, and I'll invite some of my friends, and we'll do a thing. You can do that. That's not the hard part. It's making it look good and getting it out there and going further than that. But we're in an age where Pledge Me does some support, and there's and you can get, and social makes it a lot easier to do, but also harder because you're fighting with other people. But honestly, I'm talking out of these other events are my hats off to them. I think that everybody's struggling to do anything, and the fact that doing anything is great. But everybody has the challenges to make these things work.
The biggest thing is that
committees.
Yeah, the other thing is that you started there as well. You started in the town hall. Town hall, or what it was, and now because you've been able to
Freeman's Bay Community Center.
Yeah. Right. So sorry, what was it again?
Freeman's Bay Community Center. Still there. Still looks exactly the same from what I can see. Great little venue. We did a small mini thing there. So.
And this is the thing about the history of Armageddon is that you came out of being a fan of Doctor Who, putting on events like that, and then slowly keeping it going and having the backing of others. Now you're at this stage where 6 shows a year possible, and I mean I love it. I mean, my first experience, like, it was in 2007, 2009. I was a part of it with part of what was Gotham Comics with Jeremy Bishop. I got to put a little comic in. I think I got to put this up there in his little book, and I was able to have my comic in there, a couple pages, and be there at the stand, and then meet Peter David, who was standing right next to me, and Greg Rucka, right? Greg Rucka was awesome. He had just done his movie White. Oh gosh, I can't remember now.
I know the one you mean.
The one that was filmed in New Zealand.
I read the book's great. But yeah, Greg's an interesting one. He's actually had a bit of his stuff made into film. I mean, more so than most, which is an accomplishment itself.
And it should have been a cult classic, but like people not aware of how good that is. And I love Greg Rucka, and he was very personable, and I was like, and I said, I'm just writing comics. And I asked him a question about, the movie, right? You've just had your comic book made into a movie. So how do you feel about that? How much control on that? And he said to me, the movie's the movie. I write comics. My story is my comic. That's my story. And if the movie, whatever they do with the movie, that's a movie. And I thought that's very professional of him to do that, because I went to school. I've got a film degree. So that's why it was a question I asked, because I was like, how do you, when we were talking about earlier about, this is my thing, I'm not going to let go of my thing. You got that when you're working with a co-creator, that sort of thing. And having Peter David there, who's like ultra more superhero, writing the Hulk and all this stuff, and him being totally different to Greg, it's like he's always Peter David's there taking notes about what he's going to do.
And I appreciate, because you're obviously very, and we talked about this a bit. You're obviously very enthused about the guests, which is great. From my experience, though, and what we've seen certainly over the last couple of years, that audience that is very guest orientated is a portion of the audience, but a bulk of the audience just wants to come to the show, and that's why we've been investing in gaming and entertainment stuff at the event, because we get a lot of people that are into that. It's trying to make it, and we're finding from a guest perspective, things are still very much up in the air. We don't know who's traveling, who's not, who wants to do stuff. It's, you know, and again, things are always different, and costs are changing all the time. And the exchange rate's dropped 15% since the last time we hosted physical guests, and that doesn't help.
Yeah.
But it's just something to keep in mind that while guests are great, you know, for me, it is one of the highlights of hosting people is being able to see behind the cloud, the curtain. It is a part of the show, not the show itself.
Right.
It's the thing that does separate it from just a normal some other things, and it's why it'll always be part of the show. But it always evolves, and it has done. And we'll probably be doing some virtual and some physical stuff in tandem, I would say. But definitely at Christchurch and Wellington, we've got about half a dozen celebrity guests planned for that one. And that's physical, not virtual. But we've also got some virtual coming in. So,
yeah. Well, talking about guests, you know, and the difference between that, because a lot of people wouldn't know them, right? Unless they're in that fandom. So I would know that
one person is, oh my God, I can't believe that person's here, is another person's, who the hell is that? Everybody's different in that respect. And I get that, and talent gets that too. And there's some that everybody knows. I mean, look, if Mark Hamill's agent contacted me tomorrow and said he wants to do a show, I'm going to fucking make that happen. But it's not something that, you know, it doesn't happen very easily. And that generally doesn't happen. So.
All right, so in finishing, I'm going to put you on solo, and you can say whatever you want to, you know, promote Armageddon, and 3 to 5 minutes, and we'll finish up with that. And you know, even with that, thank you for your time, Bill. I think you know, it's awesome to be able to have you take 2 hours of your time with this show coming up, with thousands of people in attendance, guests, events like esports. You know, the anime side, and also all the small businesses that are involved, big businesses that are involved, and especially you know, like Xbox and all that. So I'll give you, you know, finishing off with, you know, as a final say, and we'll finish after that. I'll come back and we'll say our goodbyes and thanks. But I just really want to say thank you right now for the time that you've given us.
Look, we've got our event on the Auckland show on next weekend, or whenever I mean, maybe this weekend if you listen. Depends on when you're listening to this. This is crunchy, by the way. A little bit of melanoma on his nose, but okay. Come to the show. It's for there's a lot of smaller exhibitors that and bigger ones that need your support. And this event means a lot to them. From a community perspective, it's a great place to be. And we put a lot of energy into this one, more so than pretty much any Auckland show we've ever done. And I'm genuinely looking forward to people seeing it. There's some great stuff that we've never done before. Got a couple of physical big ships we brought in, and some bigger displays and lighting and prop displays, and just things that we really, I think, are going to work. And the esports stage is going to look amazing. And if that works, then it's something we can take further and do more with over the years as well. So come to that. And if you're into comics, and hopefully you're watching this, you are, my new Time Traveling Tourist 2 book is out, and I'm happy to sign that for you, or you should buy more of the others. Step on the keyboard, crunchy, or you disconnect me. And support, there'll be New Zealand comic characters there, and Drawfest and others there. So if you can support them, that's great too, because every person who buys a comic is supporting the industry, and the industry needs every little bit you can get, because New Zealand comics is a hard thing to really reach out properly, because budget-wise, there's not a lot of money for promotion. I'm fortunate I use my show to help my books, but I also try to use it as much as we can to promote the local industry. So more support you can give them, the better.
One of our New Zealand comics greats, Jason Lenny, who pushes, prints, is it not Fun Time? Where is it? These two. Yeah, it is Fun Time. Sorry, my bad. It's Fun Time. And last year they put out Pandemania, which I had a bit in. And so, like you said, it's supporting New Zealand comics, because it's really hard to, you know, to be able to promote what is, you know, we mentioned a little bit about the whole full-time jobs that Kiwis have, and they do comics on the side, so they don't able to put as much effort into working with
it's
other
really hard
people.
to
So we end
find
up
that extra time to do it. So
yeah, so it's basically on the site. So thank you, and like you said, Drawfest is going to be there. You're going to have a whole bunch of Artist Alley stuff, and not only just those guys, but you've got all these other things that I look at, like Asian anime and manga artists, you know, that do their own thing as well. Toys, people who create soft toys, and all these other things, creatives that come out there. And so thank you, Bill. I appreciate what you do with Armageddon, and thank you for taking the time to explain certain things, and also talking about the comics that you create and the backgrounds about these awesome books, and you know that I've enjoyed. I love the Warden. It's you know, sometimes you know you can read a book and not really get it, and sometimes you can get it right away. And I love the idea that you have of these books, because it's kind of interesting, like seeing how you as a, you know, bits of you are in all these books, you know, and you kind of come across, and you got your fantasy, you got your superhero, you got your time traveling, everything that a nerd always thinks about, as you know, when they're reading comic books. And so thank you for your time. Is there anything else you want to say before we finish off here?
no,
Before I
just
kick you out and kick myself out.
be kind, have fun, enjoy yourself. I mean, that's just come in a group if you can, see some friends, but honestly, anything you can support in the pop culture industry in the world. There's local stores you can visit. There's our events, there's smaller events, there's social stuff. It's all good.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, guys. Thank you, Bill, and we'll see you next time. Ka kite ano, and wherever you are, be well, be safe.